If you clicked on this video, it's because you want to know how a calorie deficit works, but we're going to even go beyond that and actually set up a calorie deficit for you. And we're going to use ChatGPT because it's the 21st century, and why not? Why does anyone want to do math by themselves these days? That's insane. Why do anything by yourself? Just get ChatGPT, get one of those Tesla robots, install it in there, boom, you've got a personal assistant.
Okay, that's beyond the point.
Let's go ahead and use ChatGPT for a calorie deficit. Before we do, let's explain a little bit about how this works, because I think this is typically either over-explained or not purposely explained in an easy to understand manner. So pretend for a second that you have $1,000 in your checking account and you want to go out and buy a new piece of gym equipment for your home gym, and it costs $1,500. And you're like, you know what, screw it, I'm just gonna buy it. You're super enamored by the new piece of equipment, you're excited about it, you don't really care that you don't have enough money for it.
Talking from personal experience.
You go out and you buy it, and what happens is your mate goes,
whoa, you don't have enough money in your checking account.
We have to activate overdraft protection. Now, what's overdraft protection? Well, if you don't have this in your bank, I would definitely get it because it can be useful, especially if you're gonna go out and buy new gym equipment, you don't have enough money. Overdraft protection is essentially taking from your savings to make up for the fact that you overdrafted or you overspent in your checking account. Now, your body works in a very similar way. Let's do some numbers to help make this make a little bit more sense. Let's say that new piece of gym equipment is $2,000, but you only have $1,500. So what overdraft protection does is it takes from your savings account to make up for that deficit that you have and zero out the number. That's essentially what your body is doing with stored body fat and energy expenditure. So let's say you burn 2,500 calories, but you only eat 2,000 calories. You have a 500 calorie deficit. So your body goes, well, we can't have a negative amount of energy, so we have to pull from our fat cells. And I do this because this is where all my fat is. It's right here in the middle. It pulls from our fat cells and it says, okay, I'm gonna take 500 calories out of savings, AKA body fat, and I'm gonna zero out that deficit number because your body loves homeostasis. Homeostasis is just basically the balance between how much you burn and how much you eat. Your body's always trying to calibrate that so it ends up being some sort of a zeroed out number. Now, if you're in a calorie deficit, if you're trying to lose body fat, you're always going to be in a deficit and your body's always gonna need to pull from your fat cells in order to zero out that number. So that's essentially what a calorie deficit is, and the way that we need to solicit that is first by figuring out how many calories we burn each day so that we can subtract a certain amount of calories from that in order to use body fat to zero out that number. So let's go dive into a little bit more on how to do that. So in order to understand how many calories we need to eat, we first have to understand how many calories our body is burning a day. And this is always going to be an estimate unless you're in some sort of university lab and they are getting the most accurate data from you in order to figure out what this is. So for us normal folks who just want to figure this out and do this at home, us dads that are just trying to make this happen for us, or anyone to be completely honest, we have to use something called a TDEE calculator. But we're going to take it a step further and use ChatGPT to make this so much easier. Before we dive right into that, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about energy expenditure, because I think this is something that oftentimes doesn't get talked about properly, and it's really an important thing to understand. So, how many calories does our body burn a day? Well, it's broken up into a couple of different categories. Some of them you have control over, some of them you don't. So the first one is called your BMR, your basal metabolic rate. And this accounts for about 70% of the total calories you burn every single day. You have virtually no control over this. This is just genetics. This is how tall you are, how much you weigh, how much body fat, how much muscle mass you have, which you do have control over. But even then, if you have more muscle mass, it only contributes another 1 to 2, maybe 300 calories on how many calories your body burns just being who you are and how you're built. So don't worry too much about this. The next one is something called NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. You have a lot of control with this. This contributes anywhere between 5 to 15% of the total calories you burn. This is one of the reasons why we talk so much about step count, or I talk so much about step count. You want to try to average 8 to 12,000 steps a day. That's a big time goal, and that's a lifetime goal. So don't think you have to do this tomorrow, but that's exactly what you want to try to do, because you raise that non-exercise activity thermogenesis and you end up burning more calories doing kind of the stuff that you're doing every single day. Now, to get to that 8 to 12,000 calorie or step count each day, you do have to implement some purposeful walking or some purposeful movement. It's not going to be easy if you're a desk dad, or you're a desk job dad, or you're somebody who sits for long periods of time, it's gonna be difficult to do that. So you still have to try to implement more walking throughout your day. And that's part of just being a healthier and a more active person. The next form of calories that your body burns is something called the thermogenic effect of food. Now, this is only about 10% of the total calories you burn. It can make somewhat of a difference. Like for example, if you are somebody who's eating about 2,000 calories, eating the right foods, proteins, fiber foods, vegetables, things like that, you can burn an additional 200 calories, I should say, a day if you get this right 100% of the time. Now, I wouldn't bank on this as being your calorie deficit because it's one of those things that while we can control it, we might not be able to fully understand exactly how many calories we're burning from this. But just know that if you're eating a whole food diet, plenty of protein, plenty of vegetables, plenty of fiber, your body's gonna have to actually burn more calories to digest that food, especially protein, and that's gonna contribute to burning more calories. So don't bank on this, but again, eating healthier foods makes this a lot easier. And if you're trying to lose body fat, eating healthier foods is probably the best route anyway, because it's gonna fill you up and keep you full. And if there's one thing that sucks the most, other than maybe sleep deprivation, which does happen as you get lower and lower with body fat, is that when you are in a deficit, you are going to be hungry. And this is completely normal. Don't let anyone tell you that being hungry in a deficit is not normal. Yes, there are ways to mitigate this, there are ways to reduce this, but at some point you're always gonna be a little bit hungry, and you're gonna be hungry for a longer period of time because, again, you're eating less calories. So that's the other effect. Now, the last one, and probably arguably the most important one to talk about in my opinion, is the exercise activity thermogenesis. Now, the reason why I think this is one of the most important things is because I think so many people, so many dads, so many guys out there try to out-exercise how many calories they eat, and it just isn't going to work because our bodies are not set up that way. Through years and years and years and thousands of years, maybe even millions of years, I don't know. How long have humans been on Earth? Do you know? There's my invisible video guy giving me no advice whatsoever. That's actually just all of my garage stuff that isn't fitness stuff behind me. But anyway, how many calories do we actually burn a day? And is there any sort of issue with trying to outrun or out-exercise a high calorie diet or a calorie diet?
The answer is yes.
Because there is, not without going too much into it, because there is sort of a video for this by itself I will do, but there is sort of a constrained model of energy expenditure, meaning that your body's only gonna ever burn a certain amount of calories. It's designed to try to reduce how many calories you burn. It doesn't mean you shouldn't exercise, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't go out and do cardio and lift weights and all that good stuff. But it does mean that at a certain point, there's a much lower ceiling with how much exercise you can do. A much better strategy is trying to do the most amount of exercise that you can sustainably and reasonably, and then lower calories little by little by little by little, and then you are going to create a very sustainable fat loss calorie deficit. All right, so that's how that whole thing works. Now, how do we figure out this number? Like, Shane, just get to the point, dude. Why do you keep explaining all this background information? Because nobody else does, and the more you know from a background perspective, the easier doing this calorie deficit is going to be. So now what I want you to do is go to the description of this video if you haven't already. In that description is a prompt that you will be using in this video in order to create your calorie deficit. So what you want to do, even if you don't have a premium version of ChatGPT, you're going to go to ChatGPT, you're going to copy that entire prompt, and then you're going to paste it in there. But before you hit enter, make sure that you're filling out some of that information in there. Your age, your height, your weight. If you know your body fat percentage, which a lot of us don't, and that's okay, go ahead and put that in there. And then probably the most important part, and you might have to pause this in order to get all that information, so I'll give you a couple of seconds. Play the Jeopardy music right here. You hear that editing guy? Yeah, I hear it, thanks. Why does he sound like the gingerbread man from Shrek? Okay, so you filled out all the information in ChatGPT. Now what you're going to do before you hit enter is I want you to look at your activity, and I want you to look at the activities. I pre-built this, all the different activity levels. Be as honest as you possibly can. And if you're not sure, it's actually probably better that you say that you are a little more sedentary than you think you are. For example, I would probably fall under the moderate to active or moderate activity level. But when I created my calorie deficit, I did it under light activity because I have a desk job. I don't always have an opportunity to get out and go for a walk. It's the middle of summer. Most days it's 105 degrees. Not always gonna go for a walk, although sometimes I still do anyway. Point being is that we're probably more sedentary than we think we are, even if we are lifting weights and maybe walking a decent bit. If you don't know your step count, that can make it a little bit more challenging. So do your best to pick your activity level, tell ChatGPT what activity level you are, hit enter, and it's gonna give you a nice long list of things to do based on all the information that you put in there. So now that you've hit enter, ChatGPT is giving you a lot of information. The three probably most important things is it's going to give you your estimated calorie maintenance amount. This is how many calories you could eat and keep your body weight from going up and from going down. So it just basically stays the same. It's also going to give you a slow, moderate, or optimal, and fast or aggressive calorie deficit. Now these are based on percentages that I guesstimated based on what I have done in the past and some research that I've done on estimated calorie deficits that you should take based on your goals and how fast you want to go. The third, and probably the most important piece of information that ChatGPT is going to give you, is it's going to tell you your rate of weight loss per week. Now, I would highly recommend that you stick with the recommendations that ChatGPT is going to give you, because this is based on science. For most people, you want to try to stick between 0.5% and 1% of your total body weight lost per week. Now, if you lose a little bit faster than this, that's okay, as long as there's a couple of things that we need to dial in to make sure they're doing good. But for the most part, that is what you want your goal to be. And why would you want this to be your goal? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, aggressive fat loss typically leads to quick burnout. And there's sort of a maximal amount of fat that you can lose per week. You might think that it's endless, like if you're losing 6 or 7 pounds in a week, you gotta keep in mind some of that might be water weight, especially if you're doing like a low carb thing. Some of that might even be muscle if you're going too aggressive and not eating enough protein and lifting weights. So there's a lot of things you have to make sure that you're doing right. The most important thing that you're doing is trying to minimize how much muscle you burn or how much muscle you lose in a deficit and how much fat you burn. You want your body to pretty much only use body fat to try to make up for that calorie deficit that we're having here. So again, try to stay in that optimal range. I understand that it can be really motivating to go a little bit more aggressive, to trying to lose fat faster. I get that, but trust me, as somebody who has done this aggressively way too many times in the past, burned out and really not lost that much fat, I can tell you that it's better to go a little bit slower, what would be considered the optimal range, go a little bit longer in your deficit, start your maintenance phase when you're done with your cut a little bit less burnt out, and have a more sustainable fat loss approach. All right, so there's one other thing I want to talk to about the busy dads that maybe want to go a little bit aggressively with the fat loss approach. Okay, so there's a couple of things I need you to keep in mind. I'm all for aggressive fat loss if these three things are still in check. You still have enough energy to actually work out. If you get to your workouts and your first set feels like the last set of your workout, you probably don't have enough energy to actually train properly. So your deficit might be too aggressive, or you might be timing your calories inappropriately. You might want to try to push more of your calories towards the beginning of your workout. That way you have fuel to actually do the training, and then you can suffer afterwards, right? Because who cares afterwards? You got your workout in. The next one is sleep disruption. Now this is one that I personally suffer with pretty much all the time. Anytime I'm doing a deficit, I get to a certain point where sleep deprivation, sleeping less in terms of quantity and quality, becomes a thing. Now, it's not always a thing. Sometimes I eat a little bit more calories at night and it makes it easier. I'm still trying to work this out, but if you are night after night after night, waking up at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., maybe even 4 a.m. when you don't normally do that, and you're not getting enough sleep, you're not getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep, then I would highly recommend that you revisit how aggressive your calorie deficit is. You might even have to bump up calories within a calorie deficit in order to make that happen. That is actually something that I did. I was in a deficit of about 700 to 800 calories, I realized, and then I was like, you know what, I'm not getting any sleep. I'm gonna lower it so that now I'm only in a deficit of about 500 calories, and I'm still losing body fat. I'm getting better sleep, not perfect sleep, but better sleep, and I'm able to eat a little bit more. And anytime you can eat more in a calorie deficit, chef's kiss. The other warning sign that I personally don't fully understand if it's a real concern or not is food obsession or always being hungry. Now, my opinion is that when you're in a deficit, you kind of just have to accept the fact that you're always going to be hungry. I think the advice given here is that if you are obsessed, if you have a ton of food noise to the point where it's debilitating you to be able to do your everyday job or spend time with your family, or it's the only thing that you care about, it might be time to think about a little bit less of aggressive calorie deficit. If you're a single dad and you don't have a family, or maybe you just have kids, or you're divorced and you live on your own and you don't have to worry about any of that other stuff, I don't know about you, but I want to spend as much time with my wife and my daughter and other family members as I can without constantly thinking about food. So if food obsession is becoming a real thing, your deficit might be a little too aggressive. All right, last but not least, to round out this video, I want to talk a little bit about weight loss plateaus, because at some point what will happen is as you are getting deeper and deeper into your deficit, you will hit a point where you have to adjust calories again, and you have to make that decision on how to do that. Now, most guys, most dads are gonna just decrease the amount of calories they're consuming, which isn't a bad approach, but I wanna give you a better approach first to make sure you're doing everything right and maintaining how many calories you can eat. Because remember, when you're in a deficit, you wanna hold on to as many calories to be able to eat as you possibly can, because the lower and lower you go, the harder and harder it becomes to sustain. So the first thing you wanna ask yourself is my activity level as high as it could be based on everything else going on in my life? If you filled out this calorie deficit TDEE calculator with ChatGPT, a lot of acronyms, sometimes it's hard to say all these acronyms, then what I want you to do is make sure that if you're at the light activity level, I want you to bump that up to moderate. If you're only working out, like lifting weights 1 to 2 times a week, maybe you're doing 1 cardio session, maybe you're only getting 6,000 steps on average a day, I want you to bump that up first. I want you to be able to get to the point where you're doing as much activity as is reasonable for your schedule, and maybe right now that's where you're at, and that's okay. You're gonna have to build in a little bit more exercise. You're gonna have to commit and sacrifice some of your lunches at work, maybe some early mornings you would otherwise be sleeping, maybe some later nights. Maybe, if you have kids, maybe your spouse can watch your kids and you can go to the gym. You're gonna have to make some trade-offs, some sacrifices in order to get to that higher activity level. But trust me, if you just do this for a short amount of time, you bump up that activity from light activity to moderate, where you're working out 2 to 4 times a week, getting maybe 7,000 to 9,000 steps, somewhere in that range. Maybe you're doing 1 extra cardio session between your weightlifting sessions. You are going to see so much better results, and you're going to be able to eat the same amount of calories. So always try to increase the amount of exercise that you can do within reason. Don't be the kind of person who's there 7 days a week, 2 hours a day, doing double days and spending no time doing anything else. I'm not recommending that unless you're sort of like some entrepreneur who has a bunch of free time, no family, and can do whatever you want. If that's you, more power to you, dude. Do what you gotta do. But if you've got a family, you've got other obligations, you got a 9-to-5 job like I do, you have to be smart about how you moderate how much activity you do. And for some of us, that's only gonna be, maybe a maximum of 4 workouts a week in the gym, maybe 1 or 2 early morning cardio sessions, and maybe just trying to get more walks throughout the day. And that's completely fine. Remember, you have to work within your schedule. There are some sacrifices you might have to make here and there, but at a certain point, you're gonna hit your exercise cap, and then what you wanna do is you want to actually decrease calories. So the strategy here is try to increase how much exercise you do within reason. When you've hit your cap, then you can start thinking about hitting a lower calorie amount. Now, what I would recommend that you do is that when you increase exercise, let that ride out for at least a month. See if that extra exercise, that extra 100 to 200 calories you're burning a day, helps get you out of that plateau, and then you're starting to see your scale weight go down and down and down and down. Now, when you hit another plateau, you might at that point then have to decrease calories a little bit more, maybe 150 to 200, to start seeing that plateau get lower and lower and lower. It's one of the reasons why starting at a high calorie amount in terms of consumption is probably the best strategy you can. So if you just came off of a bulk or you're eating a lot of food, now's a good time to cut and get some of that body fat off of you. All right, the last thing I want to talk about, which probably should have its own video, but I wanted to at least mention this, is please track your weight. I know for some of us, looking at the scale can be sort of daunting. It can be kind of one of those things where it's a big reality check. It's like, wow, I didn't realize I was that fat. It's like, okay, yeah, it kind of stings a little bit, but remember that the more you track, the more accurate you're going to be able to get with a reasonable and a sustainable fat loss approach. If you're kind of just freeballing it, not really knowing what you're doing, you don't know how to make adjustments when things start to stall. So the more you can track, it's really easy. Just weigh yourself in the morning, go to the bathroom. When you wake up, go to the bathroom, get everything you can out of you within reason. Don't wait an hour to go poop or whatever you gotta do. Go to the bathroom, weigh yourself, let the scale do its thing, get off of it, and move on with your day. It's not meant to be obsessive over, it's really just meant to track what's going on. And if you track what's going on, you're able to make really fine-tune adjustments to how much you consume, how many calories you burn each day through exercise, and you're really going to dial in this fat loss thing and have great success. So thanks a ton for watching this video. I hope this helped you figure it out, along with the help of ChatGPT, on how to find an estimated calorie amount. If you have any trouble with anything with ChatGPT or the prompt that I made or anything else, put it in the comment section down below. I'm totally fine with answering as many questions as I possibly can, and who knows, maybe it'll spark another idea for a video. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I'll see you in the next video.